Now, it's a surprisingly frequent situation. A couple breaks up, and instead of keeping things civil for the children, one partner does all they can to turn the family against the other.
Often, the safety of the kids is used as a legitimate excuse to exclude one parent from being a part of the child's lives. But in many cases, that exclusion just isn't justified.
We're joined in the studio by Jan James, founder and chief executive of Good Egg Safety and a passionate campaigner on this subject. Jan, why do you feel so strongly about this?
Thank you. You just actually said that, some parents may be, held back from seeing their children for legitimate reasons. And if that were the case, it wouldn't be called parental alienation. If a child is being held back from a parent because the other parent is known to be abusive, then that would be called estrangement, and that would be perfectly right to protect them in those circumstances. What parental alienation means, and it's been much misrepresented in the media, as you'll have probably seen, is where a parent, without any justification, will psychologically manipulate a child to reject a parent. I think, the best place to start is Kafka's, who deal with 140,000 cases annually. And their definition is basically that, when a child's resistance and hostility towards a parent is not justified because they've been psychologically manipulated. But worse than that, and this is the reason I've got involved, is that the former chair and chief exec of Kafka's, Anthony Douglas CBE, described parental alienation as a deliberate manipulation of a child by a parent, and he said that it had become so common in family breakdowns. Kafka's felt that it was 80% of their most intractable cases was as big an issue as any other form of child abuse or neglect. And that's why I've got involved.
I was going to ask that question, how common is this? And you've already answered it there. I mean, what we're saying is you're weaponising your child against your partner. That's what we're saying here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's a form of post-separation domestic abuse, where psychological abuse and coercive control is at its heart. And it's devastating for children. I mean, I've spent a lifetime campaigning to keep children safe in cars and homes. And the psychological safety of children is critical too. And we've interviewed many adults who were alienated as children. And their stories are uniquely heartbreaking. They say the same things: suicide ideation, drug and alcohol abuse.
So this is the child grown up.
That's right.
They've got all of these issues because they had a stunted relationship, as it were, or a poisonous relationship with their family.
Absolutely. They've been told repeatedly that a parent could be a mother or a father, because this is not a gendered issue, no matter how many times we're told it, they've been told that that parent is unworthy, is unfair, is dangerous, has alcohol issues or whatever, and they grow up without that loved parent in their lives. You've got to remember that parental alienation is generally where the parent had a close loving bond before separation, and then subsequent to separation, that bond is severed, that attachment bond, not just with the parent, but also with a whole host of the family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, a whole half of their familial heritage.
So going forward, you're damaging their ability to have a relationship with somebody else. If you can't trust your nearest and dearest, and you thought they were there for you from birth, and then you can't, is this what you're? So it's a cycle of abuse.
And of course, it's not just the parents, is it? Because this affects grandparents as well, and relationships with other relatives too.
It does. To answer your question, yes, absolutely, and it's transgenerational. The problem is when you abuse a child, whether it's parental alienation or other forms of domestic abuse, children either become victims themselves or perpetrators. So the cycle of abuse continues. And it isn't a surprise that many adults who were alienated as children subsequently find their own children alienated from them, because the characteristics of the partner that they choose, a life partner, subconsciously they're choosing similar characteristics to their alienating parent. And then they wonder why the cycle is, repeating. So that is a major issue.
And does this affect children of all ages, or is it particularly amongst younger children who?
You can see alienation in all ages, but what our study showed was it's particularly prevalent from the age of 7 or 8. So when the cognitive abilities become more, they're more able to be manipulated. So that's kind of the age group.
And what's the solution? I mean, do the courts not have what?
Oh, just a little question like that, Philip.
I mean,
Question.
what can the courts or the government or what can be done to deal with this?
The solution is firstly to recognise it as the abuse it is. Let's be really clear about this. No parent would put their child's healthy needs below their own and cause them to disrupt a close, loving bond with a parent, grandparents. It's an appalling legacy to give to a child. You know, low self-esteem, lack of self-worth, suicide ideation. So we want government to stop it and recognise it for the abuse that it is.
So have we not wanted to call it abuse? Do we shy away from calling it abuse?
Well, we do. In fact, it's been reversed, and we're told that parental alienation is actually a means for abusive fathers to further victimise mothers. Now, of course, some may play the alienation card, but our research shows the majority are actually being alienated. We work with thousands of mothers as well as fathers, and they have been alienated by an abusive father.
And you've done that study. I was going to look at that study.
Yes, the study. So we're campaigners, social campaigners, and we work with UK and Scottish governments. So everything we do is evidence-based and everything we do is evaluated. So the first thing we did when we stepped onto this explosive societal landmine was do our homework. And we set up a survey. We hired an independent researcher to devise the questions. And we worked with our global task force. We work with leading experts in the field. Erin Pitsey, the founder of Refuge, many barristers, lawyers, leading child psychologists. And we put the questions on our fairly safe child seats site, Facebook page. We were inundated. We had over 2,000 responses, 1,500 from the UK, 43% from mothers, which tells us clearly it's not a gendered issue. And actually, the figures were horrendous. Almost half the respondents hadn't seen their children for more than 6 months. 1 in 10 hadn't seen their children for more than 5 years. And I ask viewers to just imagine, if you have children, what that must feel like for you. And if we want to call it a different term, let's call it what it is. It's domestic abuse by proxy using the child, and it's also child abduction, because it doesn't matter if that child is thousands of miles away or around the corner. You cannot get to see them. The police won't get involved because they regard it as a civil matter. So you go to court, you get a child arrangements order made in the child's best interests, breached with impunity. You then go back to get an enforcement order, and 90%, less than 90%, are actually enforced. So parents have nowhere to go, and they are basically re-victimised. They are told that they are not suffering, that parental alienation is not an issue, yet Kafkas had said it was 80% of their most intractable cases. So we need it to be addressed.
And the government have recognised now parental alienation in the domestic abuse bill by putting it in the guidance, saying it's part of controlling and coercive behaviour. So
yes.
I'm sure that must be a good step forward.
Thanks to you, and also Baroness Mayer and a number of other brave souls that stood up in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Yes, and we hope that it's retained in the guidance notes. It's still being debated, but it's still there despite an onslaught of misinformation, because it absolutely unequivocally is domestic abuse. And I had the opportunity to ask the policy campaigns manager for Women's Aid which element of the alienating behaviours that's currently in there, repeatedly denigrating, demeaning, obstructing contact, destroying mementos, creating financial hardship, which of those were not abusive? And her answer was, it comes under coercive control. So Women's Aid themselves have admitted that this is coercively controlling behaviour. The reason we want these to be identified, as the Act is meant to be, to help victims identify, it was a declared aim by government, is that many parents don't know what it is. And by the time they know what's happening to them, it's too late.
Jan James, thank you so much